Hi, I'm Kathy Knauer, Penfield Town Historian. It's January 12th, 2026. I'm here with George Hall, who grew up in the northwest section of Penfield, across from the Kidd Castle. He knows a lot about that area and is familiar with the Kidd family. So James and Elizabeth Kidd purchased 70 acres in that section of Penfield, almost in Webster, but it still is in Penfield, in 1938. They built a 38-room home for their family, which included 5 children. So Mr. Hall had the opportunity to play with the children and was familiar with the farm and the grounds. So where did you live in relation to the Kidd Castle?
Directly across the street. Our driveway and their driveway were almost opposite each other. You might say we were at 1206 Bay Road, and my father had purchased 8.5 acres in 1935, and from a Mr. Edwards who lived over on Empire Boulevard. He built a Cape Cod style home there. He was very poor at the time, as he lost all his wealth and possessions in the Great Depression, so he was just digging his way out. Purchased the property with a World War I veterans pension. But anyway, he built a Cape Cod style home there, mainly from used lumber from the East Rochester car shops, where they would rebuild old wooden railroad cars at the time. We had a well that produced a lot of iron-rich water, and an outhouse and so forth. And I did go to the, I was born in 31, so I'm 94 today. And we moved out there in 1935 from Chalai. I went to the Little Red Schoolhouse on the corner of Creek and Plank Road, 2nd and 3rd grade. We also had an outhouse there at the time, and a coal belly type stove inside. That was very interesting. That would be another time to talk about that experience. But anyway, yes, I remember when the Kidd mansion was built. We were all sort of excited about that, and it was quite a home. And during my early days, I had a brother, Bob, and another brother, Jim, older than me. We played with the Kidd children. They were around our age. There was their children were. Gail was the oldest, and then Jim, and then Ann, and then Ed and Beth. I think that was the way. Their ages are right, but anyway, I had the experiences of going in the mansion, many times with the kids, and it was a beautiful place. They had a 3-car garage. I often wondered, and then there was sort of a portico over to the house that they could walk from the garage to the house. Why they never covered that, I don't know, but it seems in the wintertime that would have been an advantage. But anyway, and the house had a beautiful kitchen. I remember the pots and pans hanging from the ceiling, and everything was sort of stainless steel. And of course, they had I don't know if they had 2 maids. I know they had 1 maid anyway, and a chef at one time, and several bedrooms upstairs. And Mr. Kidd, James Howard, he always seemed to emphasize his middle name, James Howard the Third, I believe, second or third. He had a study that it was a part library, part study, and then he had a secret panel in the wall that opened up, and then he had a little bench in there and things, and he would work on duck decoys or whatever he wanted in there.
A secret chamber.
Yeah, sort of a secret chamber. Yeah.
Wow. So when you played with the children, what kind of things did you do?
Oh, gee, I don't know, the normal thing, hide and seek and kick the can and all of those things. And
I understand they had some boats, at least a sailboat.
yeah,
Did you
they
go
had
out?
a sailboat. It was the lightning class. And the road to the was on the north side of behind the garage. It was a trail down through the woods and down to the bay. And one thing about that, at that time, this was prior to the St. Lawrence Seaway. The Lake Ontario and of course the bay, adjoining bay, were lower at that time. And I think they raised, when they put the seaway in, they raised the overall height of the lake, I think approximately about a foot or so. But anyway, the trail went in and around the swamp and then came to a boathouse, and they had a boathouse there for and a small dock for the lightning, and they had a canoe. But it was a very nice sailboat. I went out on it a couple times. I didn't know how to sail, but I went out with Jim in the sailboat a few times.
Did you also help with the chores at their farm, or did you have enough at your own?
Oh no! I worked. That was my main source of income for a little guy at the time, And well, besides that, the adjoining farm, there was all farmland then, total farmland, and we made our little bit of money we got working for Louis Blanchard on the corner of Creek and Plank Road, and some of the other farmers around the area. But yeah, we had a lot of fun playing with the kids, and we played in the barn. There was of course, the property was bought from Kenny Williams, who had a beautiful farm there, a huge barn, very big, 26 Jersey cows, a ferocious bull, and 5 horses. He had 2 Belgian work horses, big ones, and an black English pony that the girls would, they were trained to ride the English pony with the hat in the English style, or riding breeches and all of that the young ladies did at that time, I guess, on that pony.
Okay. So did you attend school with any of the kid children?
No, I did not. No. I think, best of my knowledge, they went to private schools when they were young. I think as they grew older, I know Ed and Jim went to Webster school system, and the girls, I don't know where they went to school, but yeah, we used to. I'm still talking about the young, when we were playing together and hanging around, and we'd play in the barn up in the hayloft. In the early days, prior, there was no baling of hay. It was always put in loose, and the hay mow had a lot of loose hay in it, and it was great to jump off the beams of the barn into the hay, and we had a lot of fun, just doing those kind of things. And of course, I worked on the farm quite a bit. And
What kind of things did you do?
well, now they had a farmhand who moved into Kenny Williams' home, Charlie Heenahan, and his wife Pauline, and they had 4 kids. They had 2 boys, John and Eddie, and 2 girls, Luann and Barbara. And he took care of the farm, but anyway, they grew quite a few cash crops, and also hay and grain, oats, and sometimes wheat for the herd, for the cows. So it was quite a bit of land work. Today, where if you were to drive down to the YMCA, that whole contour of the land was dug out because it sloped mainly from Bay Road gently down to the mansion, and it's all been dug out now for where the Y sits and so forth. But that was all worked land, and we grew all kinds of things there. And then to the right side of the driveway, that land was also worked over quite a bit to the north side, and that sloped down gently, and it's all been dug out and landscaped for what it's there now. But yeah, and I would do what I could do as I got bigger and stronger. I could do more, and they had a tractor, an Oliver Row 70 tractor that we would do the plowing and the fitting of the land with that, and also it had a drive wheel on the pulley on the side that we could run the threshing machines for filling the silos, and that was a fun job. We'd cut the corn. We grew corn there, and we'd cut the whole stalks down, and they'd go into a chopping machine, and then get blown up into the top of the silo. And one of my jobs was working inside the silo, tramping the silage down, and you came and me and another guy, and you come out of there, you were black.
How did you get out?
Okay, in the silo and the inside part facing the inside of the barn, there were door sections that were about approximately 3 foot, 2.5, 3 foot, and they were put in, and then they had rungs on them that you could climb on. And as you filled the silo, you added these sections on until you could be able to, when it was full, you climbed all the way to the top and shoveled out silage down morning and night to feed the cows at the bottom of that.
Sounds like dirty work.
It was.
So I read that Mrs. Kidd had beautiful gardens. Do you remember the gardens?
Yeah, somewhat. I didn't interest our, being kids, we didn't interest ourselves in that too much. But yes, she did, and she was such a nice lady, Mrs. Kidd. Yeah, so nice to us, and one I remember the one thing that sticks in my head is that we would be playing, and I think it was around 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon. She would open the bedroom window upstairs and say, "Children, it's reading time." and of course, she had that finishing school accent. She went to Boston Finishing School. Of course, that's where the money came from, her side of the family. I think she was a Lyons. I think that was her name, and her father was one of the original investors with Kodak, I think. Very nice lady. But
She would call her children in to read?
oh yeah,
Did you go in to read as well?
No, I didn't. No, we didn't go in, and but we were inside and in the bedrooms and I mean the whole house was just fabulous inside. I remember that, and quite large, and what a contrast to where I lived.
Sounds like it.
But anyway, yeah, and they were so nice to us, and they'd make us lunch, you know, and so we'd come in for lunch and sometimes.
Nice.
And I remember I'm kind of jumping around as things come to my mind, and I know in the front there was a circle driveway around the front, and there was a big old, I believe it was an elm tree in the middle. It was beautiful, though, the landscaping.
Shade tree.
Yeah, and I remember they had a 1941 Oldsmobile Rocket. It was the first. That was one of the first cars out with an automatic transmission. They had one, and we thought that was really something.
So, unfortunately, as the children grew up and left home, the parents decided to sell, and they couldn't find anybody who needed a 38-room house. That was very hard to heat, I understand, as well. So it didn't sell, and it sat and went downhill, more and more destruction to it. There were teens that were breaking in and doing whatever teens do.
What a shame. Yeah,
But eventually, there was a group that held a haunted house in there. Now, did you attend that, or were you adult and already?
I just lost contact in the early teens. That was about when we cut off anything, and yeah, but it was great growing up on that farm. It was an awful lot of work. I remember, of course, times the baled hay came along. We had to load all the wagons and things with that. And I remember hoeing potatoes over there. And I learned to drive first on the tractor, and then they had a 35 Chevy 1.5-ton pickup truck. I learned to drive that, and by the time I was 16, I could drive. In fact, there was a kid up the road, Hamilton's, lived on the other side of the road. She had a Model A coupe, and we were 15, and she'd let us take that car. We were driving around the town of Webster there.
Did you?
Prior to having a driver's license.
About the same as now. You were 16 to get a driver's license.
Yes. Yeah. And but things like that. Now, I was also on the very northeast corner of the property. It was behind the. If we started across the street where the kid driveway went down, there was an open lot, and then house that's still there to this day. That house is still there. I don't know whether it's a pizza parlor or what, but he was a minister, Reverend Cann, C-A-N-N, and his wife lived there. And then there was another open lot, and then the Hamiltons and the Giordano's. Giordano's was an old Italian family, and they had three boys that we used to play with, and it was great. You could go in that kitchen any time of the day, and there's always the big pot of spaghetti sauce there all the time, and then beyond that, going north was on the west side of the road was O.W. Lee's. He had a pear orchard there, and to this day, I think there's a Lee Road. It's all developed into housing now, but the Lee Road. And then there was Avalon Trail. That was almost on the border of Penfield and Webster, I think. But they went down, and there were several cottages on the bay down there at Avalon Trail.
Are they still there?
They're still there, and the people are still living there. And but it was all dirt road at that time, and kind of reminds me of my dad. He was quite a real good mechanic. He got a job at Brockway Motor Company, but he got a hold of an old 1929 Brockway and cut the frame down, so it was the wheelbase was very short. There was probably about 8 or 9 feet between the front wheels, and he put in two 4-speed transmissions, one behind the other, and then poured a great big block of cement on the back end for weight, and that was our farm tractor that we used. But anyway, he got a hold of a wing off an old plow from one of the towns around our area. Bought Brockway trucks for their snow plowing and town trucks. Anyway, he got a wing off an old plow and a hand crank, and that made quite a snow plow. We put chains on the wheels on the back, and we plowed out Avalon Trail. We plowed out Glen Edith. Of course, Glen Edith came straight out at that time. Are you familiar with? If you're familiar with Glen Edith now, it's all filled in, but the Bay Road used to drop down and back up to the Ridge Road, and that's where Glen Edith came. Anyway, but we'd plow those out, because nobody else would plow them.
Nobody else would plow them. Why?
Because it was too hard to do. But I remember that, and my job was to sit up there. It was all wide open. We had no cab on. My job was to crank that plow up and down. But anyway, and now another thing I recall, there was on the Kidd property, the next piece of property south of that was in behind the homes on Bay Road, was the Smith property, and today there is a Smith Road that goes down off of Empire Boulevard. It's the entrance to the Lincoln Park. I think there's a pavilion down there, county park and pavilion down there. But that was the Smith farm. And there was a big cider mill down there. They made cider, that Charlie Smith and he was a character. Charlie was, and I used to trap that whole area down there. I trapped muskrats mainly, and raccoon and a fox once in a while if I could get them. But anyway, I bought my first car with what money I made trapping. It was still very much farmland, in those days. And,
it sounds like you had an adventuresome childhood and young adulthood.
Yeah.
And you were lucky to grow up in the area that you did.
Yeah. And what I was going to tell you about on the northeast corner of the Kidd property behind the Hamilton House, Cairns House, during the World War II, Bausch and Lomb built a tower in that very corner out of 2x8s, or 6x8s, and it was over 110 or 120 foot high. And Bausch and Lomb during World War II, one of the things they did was they made range finders for artillery pieces, and they would take those finished products to the roof of Bausch and Lomb and sight them in on that tower. They knew the exact distance from Bausch and Lomb to that tower, and they would adjust their instruments and so that they were exactly record exactly what they saw. So that was interesting. And here's a story that my brother, my Bob, and I and another kid, Kofod kid who lived down in the Dugway. There was on the south side of the Dugway, there was a road goes back in there. It's still there, but there was a farm back in there, and Kofods lived in there, and they were immigrants from Denmark. And Tufa Glenn, she named it Tufa. That's a Danish name. She named that.
Do you know what it means?
No.
No, I don't either.
But anyway, that was interesting. We used to play with Dane Kofod because I forget how we met him. I think when I was going to the little red schoolhouse, and he was one of the pupils there. But anyway, Dane was there, and what crazy kids! They had a fence around the base of that tower, but we'd get over it. And my brother had an old nail keg, the wooden kegs were held together with a round steel rings around them, and we'd fill that with junk and climb all the way up the top and scale them off. Well, he was going up about halfway up, and then Dane was coming up behind him. He was going to do it too, and I was still on the ground. Well, he put his belt through behind one of those steel rings around him, and that's how he held the barrel full of junk. Well, he got about halfway up, and that ring came off, and down came the barrel, hit Dane, knocked him down on the ground, and he hit concrete foundations for the four corners. He hit one of those and put his head over here. And and I remember his family were Christian Scientists. They didn't believe in going to hospital or anything along that line. And I ran over and got my dad. He was home. It was a Saturday, and he got the car and came over, and my mother called the Kofods, and they says, "Don't treat him. Don't do anything to him." And my dad says, "The hell with that. You're going to the hospital." And took him to the Genesee Hospital. He came out of it okay. It was, but boy, that was a scary old thing, and crazy kids things we do.
And some things have never changed. Kids still do things that they can get away with.
Yeah. But anyway, on Bay Road in that same area, I know south of the kid farm, there was one house where the Watsons lived. They had a just over the Penfield line in West Webster. They had a nursery there. Yeah, I think it's a dental office today, but the house is still there. But anyway, they lived there, and then there was an apple orchard, and then Louis Volk lived there. Louis Volk belonged to the Rochester Fire Department, and he built most of the fire trucks. Back in those days, there was no company that built fire trucks to any great degree, and Louis built a great deal of the fire trucks for the Rochester Fire Department, and then there was the Welcher Farm, of course, and so forth. Then in that where today the Wegmans parking lot is, that was an big open field. There were 3 huge oak trees there. the largest one was near our house. And when they cut that down, that tree was over 300 years old. That's how big it was. I mean, the trunk was humongous. It was probably 10, 12 foot diameter anyway. On that tree. It's a shame to see it go down.
Oh, yeah. Well, George, I want to thank you for coming out and sharing some of your many memories with us. We know a lot more about Northwest Penfield and about the Kidd family than we
There's
did
more to tell, too. I could go on to that.
part two. Thank you for coming out and spending time with us.